In an effort to do fair criticism, because truth is more important to me than any other subject that I approach in my book review videos, I always stick with the basics. And so, unfortunately, besides my beautiful face, this book review video of A Game of Thrones by George Martin is not going to offer anything you haven't already heard from any other critic ever made. And so, I don't really care if this video gets any feedback or views or whatever. I'm just doing this for me. Um, Kind of to practice my format, my style with journalism, book review videos, whatever. So, jumping right into it, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible. So, quick tangent. I made this book review video like 5 times, and each time it was like 45 minutes. I reviewed it. That was too long. Cut it down to 35 minutes, reviewed it, and I had flaws with it. Tried it again and did my best, and it still came out like 33 minutes. Total improvisation, one take. Damn. And I was like, I gotta get better at not over explaining. And I realized and that's why I avoid doing book review videos of my favorite books. It's because I talk too much about the things I'm passionate about. So let me try my best to not go into too much detail. Let's see if we can do that. So, A Game of Thrones is a epic, dramatic, dark fantasy novel from 1996, and this copy is about 800 pages. There's a large, sweeping, original fantasy continent with 7 kingdoms with long, complex details in the world building, the lore, hundreds of characters, somewhere between 5 and 10 main perspective characters, and the Game of Thrones, the plot. So the world building is extremely immersive. It's a perfect novel for many reasons. So, the main plot of what is the Game of Thrones? Like much of the history upon which it's based, it being the ultimate epic fantastical novel, with very limited magic, power, competition, politics, manipulation, different opposing creeds, and suggestions of on the sins of the fathers, so to say, the ongoing conflict from feuds that have become never ending as customs and basically clash. And essentially much of the main reason for the treachery and murder that begins the war in Westeros between these nations, these kingdoms, not nations, is fear of what the other side might do based on history, and seeing people as seeing the great houses or the kingdoms as a collective, intelligent entity, and feeling bound by one's duty to build up one's own kingdom. And for example, that is a great example of that. The flaws of pursuing chivalry with obsession, and the duty of one's namesake or the pride in one's family heritage and tradition, and the pride of one's collective group identity ahead of what one wants. A good example of that is the bribes with royal marriages, that the customs have, through the generations run far away from what they originally intended, and it's just become something that the next generation of royalty is born into. A lot of it isn't really explained, it's just sort of conjured up and imagined, and we just kind of take the bait. It's almost like it strikes a nerve in the ancestral memory or something, because it sort of makes sense. But in order to really make sense of a lot of the political seductions and bribes with fixing royal marriages and the compliance of these dutiful royal subjects going along with it, especially in the case of women who, it being true to history of this medieval setting, have no rights whatsoever, really. Well, in the case of marriage, they don't, especially, and that plot theme is kind of beaten to death. I do admit. So I mean, it has flaws. It's not perfect, but There's never been a book series I've read that has balanced, so many things so well to make the ultimate escapist experience, even if what you're escaping into is very bitter tasting, and that's kind of the point. Um, However, it's made those when there are small moments of heroism and redemption, it's made so much the stronger because it's already set in such an immersive, realistic palette of general experience. That's much stronger than a book filled with the more unlikely scenario, not based on the tragedy of what it means to be human and being alive and collective true human history, which is filled with more negativity and rough tragedy that we often don't want to see. Um, it's much more powerful than a book where very many instances of unlikely heroism occur. As much as it does warm the soul, it doesn't have the same impact. So by comparison, I think for me personally, this book series even trumps what I think are the greatest fantasy book series of all time, the Stormlight Archive and the Lord of the Rings. And before I finished book 3, I never thought it'd be possible that this would become my favorite book series of all time, but it has. So, without giving any real details away of the plot and just doing a general summary to avoid talking too much about my favorite book series, this first book is not as good as book 2 and 3. It establishes the world and the characters and a lot of the lore and motives and driving forces of the Great Houses before the war really erupts and clashes over Westeros. It's still good though. There's still suspense. There's still shocks. There's still great dialogue. Very good, witty dialogue at times. Dialogue and writing and narration altogether. Descriptions that have sometimes very beautiful passages. Great prose with like courtly dialogue, classiness, and it really does feel like the analyzing the ghost of a fairy tale. By that I mean chivalry is slowly revealed to the reader to be a facade and dead, and what it means to be human is actually something that everyone has to confront. Another example of realism: death can take anyone. No one is safe. It comes at unexpected times. Very strong, committed, powerful people have success regardless of their morality or there's nothing fair about anything that occurs in this book series. And all of these things lend to the realism and impact. Combat, medieval combat, you would think George Martin lived through it because it's so well written that it really does get your blood pumping. It's so immersive, and so there is something that moves the spirit that almost, like I said earlier, feels like it taps into like some nerve from subconscious ancestral memory, if you will, for how it. There's something about the setting and tone that feels so innocent and so virtuous and so righteous, because the intent of the book is to expose evil in a setting that is beautiful, like Middle Earth, but at the same time chaotic and challenging, more like the ugly aspects of our real world, even in nature and the unknown, as it concerns magic and mysticism as well. And so that is oddly, despite the horrors and tragedies and frankly disgusting moments in the book, which is as a slight frequent fascination with sadism for no real reason. It has this weird complementary spirit about reality that escaping into this setting and then coming back to the real world inspires you in a way to see a little more purpose in life, I guess you could say. For example, knights and a lot of the royalty whose part of their obtaining the respect and living up to their namesake and heritage is to prove themselves in battle, which is true to history, mostly rests on the shoulders of the men. It's Well, I don't really know how to describe that. I guess you could say it's exposed as a facade, but at the same time, you see the real intentions of these knights to be often self-aggrandizing, selfish. They have hideous vices and lusts because power allows them to get away with things, especially in the frequent instances of wenching and fathering bastards or not, or abandoning bastard children. Obviously, no birth control, that sort of thing, and that's just one example of the many things. Others, like past Targaryens and Lannisters, especially, are frankly sadistic, and the Greyjoys as well, or at least Theon. So the point of that is that regardless, they're powerful, and just because it's so well imagined, that power becomes inadvertently inspiring because you can sense the competence and the sense of purpose that they themselves believe in. A lot of their immoral actions they still believe are justified. So you can sense that what they're doing often comes because they have this larger than life sense of purpose attached to their position in life. And that's that theme of like I guess you could call it identity is the tragic reality of that, the good and the bad mixed is really, if you have a discerning eye, that's really one of the ongoing more fascinating themes of the book as well. So it is a morally, ethically challenging book. It also has, just universally appealing entertainment qualities like mystery, shock, suspense, adrenaline, battles. A lot of the sex is not particularly enjoyable. It's not really my thing. It may be to many people. This particular type of sex appeal is very. Sometimes it comes off as grotesque to me, but I think it was intended to be more authentic by being more grimy and like revealing of like the animal side of human nature. Not always, not all relationships or sexual encounters, I guess you could say, but it just goes to show that it at least is an effective attempt to find truth. And so I wouldn't say that, I don't know if sex appeal is the right term because I didn't think any of it was sexy. And a lot of the romance often is like either non-existent or is supposed to be an ironic facade in and of itself. And sometimes there's an occasional effective romance, but it usually meets a tragic end, especially in later books. And so it's altogether, though, has a good heart or good intention about it that's more intellectual in the grander view. People with cheap tastes who lack intellect, who are just reading for thrills and not really to think or compare it to any larger truths, might be tempted to think that it's a work of exploitation in that regard. And it's absolutely not. But it definitely is not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach. So the greatest selling points for Game of Thrones for me, greatest of all, in summary, the simplest terms: impact by way of immersion, by way of the perfect balance of just very believable, well researched world building, flawless execution from the overall delivery of the prose, dialogue, and the authenticity, like the balance of giving way to the slow burn quality, the rising suspense in moments of suspense, the nuances of mundane life. It captures what feels like would be the immersive pace of medieval times in a meta fashion, just by the way in which the book does not overly concern itself with the cheap entertainment quality of just what happens next. It does, to the extent that there are moments of twists and plot twists and whatnot, or reveals or answers to mysteries proposed, etc., especially the intentions of people you thought you understood and then later you realize, like a maze, it goes down deeper and deeper with their history, their intentions, and so when betrayals happen, there's reasons that keep you guessing and keep you engaged and keep you wanting to find out what happens next. But at the same time, for many people, the pace can be frustrating. But for me, it was intellectually expanding because um, it was making me understand that the art of temperance has the quality of joy in storytelling that surpasses the cheaper, more like moment to moment, what happens next, quicker thriller paced aspects of so many other fantasies that don't really have as much art to the overall construction or experience of the story. This is what makes this book feel like royalty compared to so many other cheap posers and imitators. This is the ultimate fantasy book series, and I cannot find an equal of that should set the bar for people who believe they have the passion, the drive, and perhaps the intellectual chops to create future books that might be as good. And I hope they do, because I definitely want to read them. It's kind of hard because for me this book series sets the bar too high, and it kind of spoils you on this genre and this type of book, because you'll never find a book that's got that perfect balance of so many things. That wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for Martin's true devotion to and honesty of character, being who he is and sacrificing so much of his life and time and research and creative so much labor that you can feel while you're reading these pages. And at the same time, you're never once thinking about the author or what the author was thinking, because it feels like a real place. It feels like real people, and it truly is an enchanting experience. So, I could talk about this book series all day. It's not without flaws, but they're so nitpicky and mundane, they're hardly worth mentioning. I've read this book twice, and I know this is my favorite book series, but I'm just now only beginning A Feast for Crows. I only just recently finished A Storm of Swords for the first time. Read A Clash of Kings twice. And then I'm going to just plow on through to Dance of Dragons and do something I never do, which is take a break from other series I'm reading simultaneously, because I usually read about 50 to 60 books at the same time and just cycle through them and go back to where I originally started, in the series, in a sequence. But instead, I like this book series so much that I feel like it's the sort of thing I've had the itch to read right now. It's giving me a lot of inspiration in many aspects of life and my own writing as a hobbyist writer. So I'm taking a break from everything else and just enjoying the guilty pleasure of Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, it's the best there is, in my opinion. This has no rating because it's perfect. Thank you for listening to my opinion. Send me your recommendations, thoughts. Thank you. Peace.